Let's talk about PoE for just a moment. What is PoE? Well, of course, it's power over Ethernet, and we know that PoE is simply power and data down the same cable, which is really kind of a neat concept. A couple of cool things about this is that it will power up devices up to 100 meters or so, which, wow, what a coincidence. That just happens to be the same distance as gigabit Ethernet. Huh, I wonder why those two seem to match up. Well, of course, it's because you're sending power and data down the same cable, and so the same length restrictions or limitations apply. It does not require a licensed electrician to run PoE, and I bring this up because in most places, I know in the U.S. there are some states that have laws that are different, but in most places you can run low voltage without an electrician's license. And so the advantage to you is when, especially when you're laying out your network diagram and your wireless, and you're trying to determine where to put access points, you can pull multiple Cat5 or Cat6 wires and give yourselves options as to how the network's going to be laid out and where you have the ability to put those access points. So because you're already there, and because you don't have to rely on anyone else of a third party to do this, please pull more wires to more locations than you think you should, or that you need, whether it's for an access point or whether it's just for general network, because a hardwired connection is always better than a wireless connection. And of course, PoE can be a standalone injector or a switch, doesn't matter which one it comes from. They work really, really well. One of the great things about PoE is that there isn't a degradation of performance, whether you're using a separate injector with power or a separate power supply versus power and data over the same Ethernet cable. It works really, really well. However, not all PoE is created equal, and there are some different types. And some people sometimes get caught in a little, you know, rabbit hole trap with this because they don't realize that PoE does have a few differences. So let's define what some of those differences are real quickly here. The first type of Ethernet, in fact, I would say there's four different types here, and the first type is legacy. And this is where your Ethernets or your PoE started. And this is where you'd buy a device and it came with its own little, power brick that you darn well better use that because it had the right amperage and voltage and wattage and everything to go along with it. And you'd go from your data source into this power supply and then from the power supply to the device. And everything was great. It got powered up, it got data, everything was cool. The problem is that people would come along and disconnect that end device and plug that same cable into their laptop, for example, and now you're shoving power into a port that was never designed to have power go into it, and people were blowing up other devices and burning out their laptops and other things that weren't meant to have power go into that connection. So the powers that be in the networking world got together and said, maybe we ought to come up with some sort of standard for all of this. And so they did that. And the first thing that they came up with was what we know as PoE, which is technically called 802.3 AF. And two things happened when they did this. They came up with, settled on, everything was going to run on 15.4 watts. And all of the manufacturers of all the PoE devices said, that's great, no problem. We can make our device work on 15 watts. Everything's going to be awesome. The cool thing, the real party trick here, was that they introduced a communication between source and device. So what happens is the device gets plugged in and is over there and it says, hey, I need power and data. And so the switch or the injector says, okay, here you go, here's power and data, no problem. Now that same person comes along and unplugs that end device and plugs it into their laptop, and that same communication now happens. And the laptop is over there and it says, hey, I'm over here, but I only need data. I don't need any power. And so the switch or the injector says, hey, okay, fine, no problem. I'll just send you data. And so it became a smart auto-negotiating system, and it works really, really well. So now you can have a PoE switch that all ports are capable of PoE, but if you plug a non-PoE device in, it doesn't send it power. It just gives it data, and everything works really, really well. And everything was going along just fine until, of course, 15 watts became not enough for some of the devices that are out there nowadays. And so they came up with a new system called 802.3 AT, or what we commonly call PoE+. And the great thing about this is it's forward and backward compatible. Doesn't matter whether you have a PoE or a PoE Plus device, but now the port is capable of delivering up to 30 watts out of that device, or out of that port, excuse me. One of the things that makes things a little bit different here is that standard PoE, being AF and AT, runs on a 48-volt system. And this is where things sometimes get a little bit different, because not all manufacturers have decided, for whatever reason, to conform to the standard of PoE. And so they don't run on a 48-volt system. They run on either 24 or 16 sometimes. And that can sometimes create some confusion, because if you take a non-standard PoE device and plug it into a standard switch, sometimes it'll power up, sometimes it won't, sometimes it becomes very finicky or does some weird things. We've seen a lot of different strange things happen because there's just more voltage going into the unit than what it is requiring. And so the bottom line with what this means is, if you're going to use a device that does not conform to the standard, it just means that you're most likely going to have to use the injector that is included with that device, or that is available to be used with that device. It's not that you can't use a standard-based switch, it's just that the device is a little bit different, so you need to use whatever injector they have available that gives it the right amperage and voltage and wattage and all of that type of thing so that it can work properly. So just be aware there are some different types of PoE out there. There are also types of PoE coming that aren't fully implemented yet. There's a new one called PoE++ that is going to have more to do with LED lighting over a network. But for the most part, as it stands currently, AF and AT are the ones that are the most common. Now, speaking of AF and AT, why is it that I say AF and AT? Those are certainly not the common terms that are used. The reason why I bring it up is because if you're looking on a spec sheet to try and determine if a device conforms to the standard of PoE or not, it is most likely not going to say PoE or PoE+. However, on that spec sheet, it will probably say 802.3 AF or AT, because that is the technical description of what version of PoE it requires. And if that's the case, you see that on there, you know that it does conform to the standard of PoE and that it'll work with the switch just fine. So that's some good information to keep in mind. Now, the last thing on the switch that we want to talk about today is a newer feature that's available in our later firmware versions that has to do with PoE scheduling and self-healing. And there are, of course, two parts to this. The scheduling is something that's kind of nice, because let's say that you have a customer that's concerned with the wireless radio waves being broadcast while they're asleep, and they want to turn their access point off during, at night, say at 11 o'clock at night, and then turn it back on at 6 a.m. in the morning. They can certainly do that, and you can now configure that to happen automatically inside the switch, and you have the ability to do it per port and per day and per hour. So however you want to set it up, if that's something that you need to use, the switch is certainly capable of doing that, so you can schedule PoE devices to be either on or off at certain hours of the day or night. The second part of this is the self-healing part, and this is where things kind of get fun, because you can now configure a switch to ping a particular device on the network. And if it loses that ping, you can set the switch to automatically power cycle that device in an effort to recover it without any intervention by you as the dealer. So, for example, if I've got an IP camera on this 0.210 IP address, and I set this up to remotely reboot the power device there as the failure action, if it loses its connection to that device, it will start to power cycle the PoE on that particular port and try to power cycle that device in an effort to recover it and have it come back up and work as normal. Because as most of you know, most of the time, a device sometimes just needs a simple power cycle. And if we can do that without having to roll a truck or get involved or use some sort of remote management, which is a great idea, but if you can set it up for the switch to do this on its own and you don't have to worry about it, then it just makes your life a little easier. So if you're interested in that, we do have a couple of webinars that are available that go into more detail as to how the self-healing and the scheduling can be set up and works inside the switch. But just know that those features are there, and they do work very, very well and can make your life a little bit easier.